from Ondine Restaurant. Today we're going to be talking all things seasonal with my good friend CJ Jackson. CJ, how are you today? CJ, you're on mute.
There you are. Can you hear me now?
I can now. How are you?
Sorry, thank you. I was just, thank you very much for pointing that out. Have me on mute all morning. I'm a bit short-sighted. I've got the wrong glasses on. No, beautiful down here. We had a bit of snow in the night, but down in Kent, it's absolutely stunning. So I'm really looking forward to talking about the fish today. So, anything you'd like to start with, Roy?
Well, you know, it's this series, you know, it's been, you know, it's quite sad, really. It's all coming to an end so quickly. But, you know, I think what we've covered is you know, it is current, it is topical. You know, even since we started this, the Seaspiracy and all these, well, the Netflix movie that's came out, and it's caused so much conversation. It's something I'd like to touch on with you later. Seasonality as well. It's not something that people normally talk about with seafood, CJ. It's almost like it's a given that the fish is there. And I'm really interested on your take on what is seasonal just now, what is current, and what do you do with, you know, with roes, with, you know, with the...
Well, you know, it's a really complicated subject because, you know, if you look through some of the information you got about fish, it'll give you quite a specific time when it's in season, it comes in, and it's when it's not good and when it's at its best. And unlike game, you've got your grouse, you've got the glorious 12th, you go out on that day. With fish, you know, it will depend on the weather, it depends on which sea it's coming from, so they all vary. And I'm starting off today looking at place. Interestingly, I went to the market and asked the guys if they could find me a fish that was full of roe, and they couldn't today. All of the roe has now been shot, or they've shot their roe. And the fish is beginning, it's not quite back into full condition, but it's beginning to. And when we're thinking a lot of fish will turn up with roe, I'm expecting to find quite a bit today. But with place, it's a popular fish, it's not very expensive, and it tends to start producing roe anytime from October through to November, and then December, going into January, February, and March. It's generally not a brilliant time to buy it because it has a lot of roe. There's nothing in here, but I have actually got a Dover sole. I've skinned one ready. And this Dover sole here, I pulled off the skin, but you can see a great big pocket of roe in there. And what happens when these fish begin to produce roe is everything they eat produces that roe, and the fish loses weight. And if you go to a fishmonger and say, have you got place as an example, their response might be, it's a bit skinny, and it's because all of the effort and everything it's eaten has gone in to produce that roe. All of these fish tend to vary when they're heading into roe. We had a beautiful turbot a couple of weeks ago, and that turbot had no roe at all, so that was a very good thing. But this place here is beginning to, it's the pocket here where my finger is where the roe was, but the fillet's now growing back into that. So once it shoots its roe, the expression is the fish is spent, it's a bit skinny, and then over a period of a few weeks, it begins to fatten up again. And I'm going to fillet this just in a moment, just to see what size fillets we get off it. And as I said, the Dover here, or slip sole, has got a lot of roe in there. Now, what I would do with that roe, I think did we have roe the other week? Can't remember which class I was on.
We did. Is it something that you would use?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I'm just going to take the head off my place, and using the heel of my knife just to cut through the head here. Beautiful coloured spots, actually, quality, stunning quality, really, really good. And sorry, about the roe, we talk often about Bataga. Now, I spent a bit of time in Italy, and Bataga's classic grey mullet roe, it's so prized over there that it goes between 90 and 100 pounds a kilo. It very often comes in a little wax coat, or very often with beeswax, and it's expensive. And the Italians grate it very finely over lots of pasta dishes. And grey mullet roe is the key one there. But actually, on a trip to do a presentation in the Ukraine a few years ago, they take roe from everything, salt it, dehydrate it, and then grate it over. And I've actually done with some of this fish. I'm just going to cross-cut fillet my place. So just so we can have a look to see how skinny it is. Knife in at the top end, just to cut down towards the fins. Knife in again, my nice flexible filleting knife here, just to take it down. And I'm going to run my knife up the middle. I'm going to go over the top. And I mean, just see how skinny this fish is. Because if the fish at this time of the year has got a lot of roe, it might be, just cut from there. And then nice sharp knife. I'm trying to talk and cut at the same time. So here, a very skinny fillet, you can see there. And just in the corner here, you can see the next little pocket of roe beginning to form. So, and what will happen with that between now and the autumn is it will fill out to the, so they're never really without a pocket. They have that little silver pocket there. This is a female fish. You can tell it's got quite a texture to it. And there you've got your fillet, but actually we left a little bit of bone on there. So if you were to cut that, and I skinned it, you know, there's not a lot of fish on there. It really is quite skinny. And the other issue with these fish at this time of the year, fine cooked on the bone, but what will happen with this is it's a bit watery. And I know that I put a fillet like this onto a baking sheet, hot oven, and it spills out a little bit of liquid. So skinny and a little bit watery. It doesn't have, it's a little bit lacking in flavour. So you can see my cross-cut fillet there. If you were to go to the underside, let's very quickly take this one off. You always got a slightly thinner fillet on the white side. One of the ways of identifying place are the little chevron markings on the skin. I'm going to bend that knife up and just run those off, and we'll see how skinny they are. So actually, if I was going to be serving this, I probably would consider serving it on the bone, because you've got tiny little fillets that are probably less than half a centimetre thick. There you've got your quarter cross fillet, taking them off as individual fillets. And there, again, not a very thick piece of fish. So that fish for one person would be great, but probably better cooked on the bone, I'd say. I don't know what what flatfish do you deal with? I think we had a conversation. Do you use clover very much?
Yeah, we use mostly lemon. I think lemon's probably the most popular flatfish that we use. We do get dovers from time to time when the price is good. You know, like megrums, etc. Place really good cooked on the bone. I always find that fish on the bone, it just keeps its nice moisture intact. You know, I know what you're saying about the water content coming out and the thinner fillet on the back, but you know, I just really enjoy having that fish on the bone. I think it eats really well, and it does keep its moisture.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to just do a courbière pocket with this and just lift the fillets up. Absolutely. And actually, when I'm dealing with members of the public, and I know we're talking with chefs now, you can't really, members of the public are so nervous of bones, but they're also very good at overcooking fish. That's probably a very sweeping statement, but and the great thing about cooking on the bone is that it's a little bit more forgiving. I'm going to lift the fillets up as if I'm going to fillet this to a courbière pocket. I'm sure I did this before. The fillets feel a little bit on the soft side, and this fish is just ready for the eating. It's got a little bend in the body. It's not straight out of water. It obviously needs to benefit from a little bit of time in the fridge to allow it to improve on flavour. I get to here, Roy, and can you see, if I open it up further, you've got a huge, great pocket of roe in there.
Oh, wow.
I didn't double check the price of this, but you know, dovers on the market can be up to £35 a kilo. Yeah. And because there's all this roe in here now, they're not so popular, so the price will drop. And you can see the fillets are not very thick. So everything that's eaten has gone into producing that roe. It'll still be good to eat, but it's not when it's actually absolutely at its top and its best. So thinking about what's good at what time of the year. So the place is recovering. Dover sole now isn't going to be great again, probably till the summer. Lemon sole are beginning to produce a bit of roe. I don't know whether, mind you, I know you're not open, but it's be interesting to see what they're like in the next week or two.
Yeah, so we're going to start cooking a little bit in the next, in the next week. We're just going to do some trials and just some tests, and you know, take some of the old favourites and just see what we're going to do with them. Craig's listening from the side, so he's nodding politely.
Nodding, very good. Well, you see here, with this fish here, it's with Dover sole, it actually wants to be not too fresh. The place was lovely today, orange spots, which highlights how the fresh quality from that. And we don't want too much of a bend in the body. If you look at my Dover sole, it can kiss its tail. If I look at my place, got another one here, it's nowhere near being able to kiss its tail. It's got a little bend in the body.
Yeah.
So, and that's good quality for that. But for my Dover sole, this is the perfect time to eat it. I remember being given one by the fishmonger once to teach people how to skin it. And it was straight out of water and it was like an ironing board. And it needed to have a few days in the fridge, and people really struggled to skin it. So that's in my mind.
How long would it take for a fish like this to come into good condition again? So just now it's a bit, it's not great, it's soft, it's bending. So when would you say it'll be back prime in season?
Well, once the row's gone, it's good. The quality's right for skinning it, but I would say that'll shoot its roe in the next 2 or 3 weeks, month or so. It then takes another month or so for it to recover. So what we're coming into early April, I would think what we might be looking at sort of July, August time, when this is going to be back to full condition, and the price will be reflected in that.
Well, CJ, I don't know if you've ever done this before, but Rosemary Williams, hi Rosemary, she made fish cakes the last time out the row. I've never done that. So
what, with the roe? Excellent idea. Yeah, okay. Very good idea. And I think anything that's got that flavour, it seems a pity just not to use it. And as I said, we think about the roe that we use from things like herring. We've had a little bit of herring at the market at the moment, but that is really starts in the next month or so, right up in the sort of the Murray Firth area up there, and then it works its way around the coast. And the roe in that's such a delicacy, the milt, which is a soft roe, and then the actual eggs, which are the hard roe, and there's such a delicacy. But it's a pity that we tend to throw these out. So perhaps we should be looking a bit more closely at what offal we can use from fish. I've chosen a gurnard to do today. By the way, the place came from Peterhead, arrived in the market this morning. This gurnard was landed in the Shetland Islands. And I know that your experience with gurnard working in Cornwall, you use quite a bit of it. It's a bony fish. It's not a premium fish, but it's certainly good on a pub menu where you're trying to encourage people to try something a bit different. I always love working with this purely because I love to see what it's been eating, because you are what you eat, so the flavour is extraordinary. I'm going to just very quickly, instead of just gutting it, I'm just going to use one of my knives here I'm going to use another one actually, one of my shorter knives. I always use the heel of the knife. I don't know whether I've done this before, but I'm just going to go up the backbone to get rid of it. It's a very spiteful little fish. And one of the reasons I wanted to use it today, Roy, is that when we're talking about underutilized species, this was underutilized for a very long time and used to be thrown back. And then one or two chefs really, really promoted it, and it became popular. And having gained that popularity, they've now put a bit of a slowdown on it, purely because they want to do some proper testing. They want to find out what the stock analysis, doing a stock analysis to see what the stock are like, so that we don't overfish it, love it, and then suddenly we haven't got it anymore. So it's been dropped down on the Marine Conservation Society Good Fish Guide down to a 3, 4, and a 5. So, certainly the Cornish ones, I think, are near a 4 and a 5. But I was keen to just use one just to have a look at it. I've taken off my dorsal spine. I'm going to use the scissors, and I'm going to insert those in the back of the head of the fish just to cut the bone from the head. And then I don't need scissors and a knife anymore. It's a very spiteful fish with lots of barbs around here, around the gill flap. There's a really nasty one there. So what I'm going to do is bend the head so the chin is on the belly. And as I do that, I'm going to put my fingers inside the where I've made the cut and pull the two back. Now you can see loads of roe coming out of that. That's a female fish. It's got eggs there. That would be very good to dry. So pull that down. You can see a bit of swim bladder in here. Those swim bladders, not on this particular fish, but are used for isinglass for beer filtration. And then what I'm going to do is hold on to the head, use a cloth to hold onto the actual tail, And I'm going to gently, let's see if I can, let me just pull that roe out first. It's quite soft. I remember doing this and people, you know, squeal with, because there's a lot of, it's not been gutted. So this is the way we're going to remove it. And pull that down. I'm going to hold on to the part that's been skinned at the top. Let's get a bit of a grip of it. And then take a bit of a step back, faffing about a bit here, and pull the tail or the head. It's very slimy this morning. I can just put it a bit further along. Might change over. That's damp. And then I'm going to.
This was like a dish like, that Rick put on the menu quite a while ago. You know, like 18 years ago, and that when Gurnard wasn't popular, and they were, down in Cornwall, the local fishermen used it as lobster bait. Well, they used
to put it in there, absolutely.
And what Rick did, he did a TV program, and he did. I remember the dish because we used to cook it at the seafood restaurant. It was, you know, Gurnard just basted in sage butter and lemon, and it just grew massive popularity. And I know now that they're really watching the stocks because they don't know actually what they do they?
No, and I think one of the issues with this, so I've just pulled off the tail, so all the skins come off, but there's still obviously bone. We cut the tail off. The one problem with this, of course, it's quite bony. And I think trying to fillet it is hard because you don't get very good yield. I'm going to cut those off. So I would normally just cook it like a tail. Interestingly, this fish, as with anything out of the Northeast Atlantic, it's got a little bit of codworm in there, a little bit of worm, which I just need to pull out and make sure that those are removed. They can at certain times of the year, certainly the spring and autumn. I know we've had problems with this when we're dealing with hake, but you cook that on the bone and it's a really nice little fish. But it is bony. And to fillet it, you end up losing a whole section here because you've got all your pin bones in there.
Texturally different, but does remind me of a small monkfish tail.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, and a completely different price point. And if you think about monkfish and how that has changed in popularity, monkfish for many years ended up in a cat flap box at the fishmongers. They couldn't sell it. And then I think it was, I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but Fanny Craddock, the first television chef in the 1970s, she realized that actually it tasted very similar to langoustine. So she promoted it as such. So you've got your tail, you've got your head, you've got nice red gills in there. This is a red gurnard, you get grey as well. And actually, I very often use this for stock making, although you must remove the gills first because it'll make it bitter. But it's a really useful little fish.
Alice Hugh is asking, what was that you pulled out? Was that a worm?
Yes, a little worm. Any fish you're going to get in the Northeast Atlantic can, or anywhere actually, they can be affected by worms.
Yeah.
It's nothing to worry about. You just need to look out for them and just be aware that they might be there. And they tend to be, if they're going to have some, they tend to have them around the belly cavity. So I need to move that into the right place. You can see where I'm running my fingers now that I can't see any more, but I saw a couple. So I would just pull those away.
I think Alice is looking for a close-up of the worm, but
let me find it. Oh, here it is. Let me see if I can give you a close-up. It's a tiny little thing on my thumb there. Hold on. This tiny little thing here.
Perfectly modelled, CJ?
Sorry?
Perfectly modelled.
Well, it'd be nice to be modelling an engagement ring or a nice diamond ring rather than a little codworm. But in the industry, with a lot of cod, because they tend to have these worms, a lot of these fish, anything from that part of the water, you get them all around the world, but they put them, they use a technique called candling, where when they fillet larger fish, they actually pass them over a light box, which picks up anything that people can then deal with. It's nothing to worry about. You just be aware that they might have them and just extract them and pull them out. I'm not concerned about that at all. Okay, so how to go with that gurnard. Now, because the gurnard's got quite a lot of roe in it, and that roe is quite soft, the fish is still quite soft, and it was fresh in this morning. It's a little bit on the soft side. It'll cook very nicely. This is why, at this time of the year, certainly in the spring as well, and before, after Christmas, using, be quite cautious about what you're buying, and just aware that a lot of these fish are not going to be at the best quality. Cod, though, if you look at cod market in Scandinavia, they love cod, which has got a lot of roe. They have their scray cod, which is from Norway, and they gather it because they think that the fish is very special. But with flatfish, I think it's a concern. And I don't know what you've been using. I know you haven't been open, what you might be using at this time of the year for your, in your restaurant, what you might be cooking with.
Yeah, we would definitely be on the lemon sole just now, but we're still just we're just about 4 weeks away, 5 weeks away. Right.
Okay, well, we're going to move on now, and I don't know whether there's a poll coming up, because I want to talk about other seasonal fish, which are the oily fish. So what I have here, beautiful mackerel, absolutely stunning. You can't quite see that from where you are, but there's a sort of it's like the Northern Lights, you know, the flash of the pink and the green in there would identify this fish as very fresh. When it comes out of water, it's almost blue at the skin. And so fish needs to be eaten very, very fresh. So it's quite seasonal, but so are herring and sardines are very seasonal. And I imagine you used bucket loads of sardines in Cornwall when they were at their best.
Oh, 100%. That was sardines and mackerel. I mean, the rule was down in Padstow, if any local fisherman family caught a mackerel, we would have to take it, regardless how many we had. That was one of Rick's rules. The poll's in progress now. So on average, how many weeks a year is a large-scale pelagic vessel away to out at sea fishing for mackerel? Is it 8 weeks, 17 weeks, or 23 weeks? And the second question is, oysters can be eaten in months that contain the letter R, true or false?
Okay.
So wait, we'll have a look at this, see what this comes.
See what people's thoughts are about that.
Yeah.
Because to start off with the mackerel, let's get your answers back first. Mackerel, there's some very, very large boats, usually out of somewhere like Fraserburgh, where they have these beautiful pelagic are big fish, or shoaling fish, I should say, that swim in shoals near a mid-water column and near the surface. They're mainly the oily species, so they're mackerel, herring, sprat, sardines, and to a certain extent things like tuna. And they do tend to swim in shoals as a protective measure. They're high in oil, so packed full of omega-3. The big boats that sail out of Fraserburgh, they go out looking for mackerel. Some of it ends up frozen, some of it ends up with a smoked market, because mackerel caught around the Scottish coast and possibly down to Ireland have higher levels of oil that you get from mackerel that you might catch off the Cornish coast and the south coast. They tend to be a bit leaner. So they're very good for smoking. And also a lot of it goes for the canning industry. There's the largest and only canning factory in Fraserburgh, International Canners, and they use large quantities of mackerel and sardines as well. What I'm always very sad about is the lack of popularity with herring now. And I think that, for years, we see a lot of herrings in roll mops and, the way the Dutch do them, sort of Bismarck herrings and smoking them and everything else for kippers. Yeah. But seeing fresh herrings, it's such a pity now. They're a really good, beautiful fish. They're again quite bony, but I love the delicate quality of them. I prefer them to sardines and mackerel, actually. But I know that a lot of the herring that they catch, certainly down the East Coast, ends up going for penguin food. And it's such a pity because it's used properly. Mad. Absolutely stunning fish. So, okay. Have we had our poll?
Yes. So, I don't know if this poll's finished or not. It's
okay. See some numbers there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, let's start with the mackerel. The big mackerel boats are actually only out for about 8 weeks of the year. They go out and they're looking for big shoals of fish, and predominantly, a lot of that fish end up being frozen. Yeah. There are smaller boats that you're going to catch. You're going to be out and about, and as you're saying, you've got your family boats coming in with mackerel and other bits and pieces. So there's mackerel is variable all year round. This particular mackerel was brought in from Spain. There's nothing coming up they had a bit from Scotland a couple of weeks ago, which had been hand caught or line caught. But we won't be seeing those boats again out for quite a few months now. So it's a very, very short window for use of those particular boats, which I think always surprises people. When I'm buying mackerel for my own personal use, I like to go for something that's been line caught. This hasn't. You can just, by pulling back the jaw there, you can see that that's not been line caught. But the other point about it, when it's line caught, there's normally a break in the jaw. But it's a very popular fish, and it's it's very, very versatile. See the beautiful quality there today. Lovely, lovely red gills, absolutely beautiful. The fish is only just coming out of rigor mortis. When this was landed, that rigor is usually there for a day or so, and it gets brought into the market, certainly from places like Spain. What happens to mackerel is they tend to migrate down towards Spain for spawning purposes. So I'm expecting to find quite a lot of, because this was brought in from Spain, I'm expecting to find quite a bit of roe in there. So you can get it, but actually looking at what's, looking at the frozen product coming into Scotland and using that is going to be a good option. What I'm going to do, I've got a couple of fish here. I'm actually going to just fillet it, I think. So for filleting this, and then we'll open up the belly and see what the roe's like. So what I'm going to do is I do a quick filleting. I'm using the midsection of my blade to cut into the back of the head, turn the knife round without putting any pressure on, and then just allow the midsection of the blade to bump over the bone and over the rib bones. And I can feel the midsection of the blade bumping down all the way down to break the tail at the end, like so. Yeah. And there you are, big pockets of roe. So what I would do with that, salt it, dry it, grate it, still good. Not as delicate. I have tried pan frying it, and to be fair, it's not as good as herring roe. Herring roe is terribly, like the fish, very, very delicate. So in the other side, I might open up one of the other fish and see if we can find a male fish. And again, just going straight down the length of the body, tipping the knife so the knife's running against the bone. If you feel like you're running across butter, you're leaving too much flesh behind, and tipping it down, right down towards the tail, like so. This is nice quality. You can see very little left on the bone there. I would bin that, wouldn't use it for anything else, but certainly salting for that. So, Roy, what would you use for, or would you have a use for roe?
To be honest, no. No, we wouldn't use the roe, not in the mackerel though.
So I think, there's...
One thing is, CJ, I know it's jumping, but I've got this poll still on my screen and I can't actually really see what you're doing so much. So oysters can only be eaten in the months that contain the letter R, true or false? And the answer is false at 64%, because there's cultivated, as we know, and in the R month is the native oysters.
So, yeah, that's right. And I've got some of those in a moment. Quite interestingly, this fish, I just want to, if I got time to fill us another one, just want to see what another one is like in the middle, and see if we can find the roe in here. So knife in, I can just turn the knife around with no pressure, otherwise I'll end up cutting through that bone, down towards the tail, really high in oil. That's another female. I'm just looking at the flesh actually. Sometimes with these fish, and it's you might, and I've only ever seen it half a dozen times in my working career, you get a very, very soft texture to the fish. And it's due to a parasite, the fish, but it's not talking about parasites, they're still, but what happens is if you gut it, it's like paste, it's almost like wallpaper paste. You very, very rarely see it. This one's a better one. We just move this over so you can actually see. I'm trying to, got a nice, this one's a little bit pasty, still would be good. It still needs pin boning, and the bloodline in there, along with the roe, needs to be removed. Thinking about other things you can eat from fish, I would also consider something like the liver. Now, the liver in monkfish, I should say, is a real delicacy, certainly for the Japanese market, and they use it in sushi. The liver in the gurnard, I didn't see much of it today, but that's also quite creamy, and there are options to use these things. Again, I know in the UK, we tend to be very squeamish about offal, but just other things to think about.
The last 2 years, I've started to see it quite a lot, you know, like it's like monkfish foie, like as in foie gras that they were using. It was really popular down south. I remember going into about 4 different restaurants and they all had it on. There's a couple of questions. Epi, hi Epi, is asking, how might you address some consumers' perceptions that serving fish that has been frozen significantly reduces its quality?
That's a really interesting point. And actually, I'm a great believer in using frozen products. If it's been frozen commercially, it's going to be frozen at its best quality, so when it's very fresh. And it's frozen generally at a much lower temperature that you can achieve in your own freezer. And therefore, you're not going to get the ice crystals that form in the fish. I have lots of people that come into the Billingsgate and go, oh, it's lovely, I'm going to buy that and put it in my freezer. And my response to that is always, you're much better buying it frozen from the frozen guys. It's been packed ready for the freezer, so it's very often backpacked, been frozen at a lower temperature. You're not going to get the ice crystals, and it'll hold better in the freezer. I reckon if you freeze at home or freeze if I have anything left over and I put it in the freezer, I make a point of using it with a month to 6 weeks because it will start losing condition. Tuna, sometimes we get tuna coming in, and that doesn't freeze very well. Salmon, if you vat pack it, will freeze really well, but just don't leave it too long. So, and I think the perception is an interesting one because the more and more general consumers that I'm working with now have less of a negative perception about using frozen product. And of course, the one thing, if you give them some frozen fish and they cook it and they overcook it, it's not going to be very good because it's almost like cotton wool, it's a bit spongy. So cooking it carefully and saying to people that fish, particularly if it's labeled frozen at sea, is always going to be a very good option because the fish is not going to have, would be frozen literally straight out of the water. So it's as fresher than anything you can get from the fresh fish counter. You see, you ask me one question and you get a 5,000-word lecture.
I'm exhausted. Here's the next one. Be quicker this time.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
So Moira K is asking, why would you catch fish when they are spawning?
Well, you can't not catch them. When a boat's going out, they can't, they can't see what they're catching. So there are going to be some things you're going to catch. And therefore, do you not buy it? Because that's not going to help the market anyway, because they've caught it, they've landed it. So with some things, it's just you can't see what's in the net. Certainly, there's some ways of dealing with it, and that is net sizes, because they will adjust the net sizes for fish that will, smaller juvenile fish will escape through. But with some things like plaice, it's just very difficult to do it, and the fishermen might not fish for it. But if it's landed, it's landed. What do we do with it? So,
I agree with you. I think, that the crustaceans like lobsters, and when you see the berries, then you've got to put them back is the right thing to do. But, when they've caught their catch, and even like if you were line catching mackerel, just by, by rod, when you get home, there's every possibility there's going to be a roe in it. So it's difficult. You wouldn't be catching any fish.
It's a really, really hard one. So making the most of the roe, but also perhaps coming up with ideas of what you can do with a fish that's not so good at that time of the year, and bringing the changes. We've got this love for things like plaice, but my favourite fish actually is lemon sole or brill. I think you can't beat them. So, right, moving on then. Next thing then is talking about the oysters. I had a little trip down to an oyster depuration centre yesterday to get these guys. And what we have here, I'm going to just move my board a little bit so you can see. What I've got here are the native oysters, which are native to the UK, and they are very seasonal. So with the native, so when we were asking about the hour in the month, native oysters have a very sort of strict season. If you open them up in the summer, and in fact, I think it's almost illegal now to do so, you will find there's nothing in there, and they're expensive as well. The native oysters to me are the real treat. I absolutely love them. What we tend to use a lot of then in the UK are these ones here. Now, I just wanted to show you these because I must get some to you, Roy. These are from a new oyster bed that's been established up in Cape Wrath, which I believe is the northernmost part of Scotland. They're very, very delicate. They're a lovely oyster. So there's lots of oysters in Scotland. It's it's a good sort of weather for them. And just wanted to have a look at how we might look at the two of these. So the native oyster is only in season when there is an R in the month. And for many decades, we always had the idea that all shellfish, particularly when I mean shellfish, the bivalve mollusks, so something that's in a double or hinged shell, would only be in season when there's an R in the month, because in the summer, the toxin levels increase, the fish go through a spawning process. But now with the rock oysters, or Pacific or gigas, which is the Latin name for these ones, the teardrop ones, you can get them year round, although the texture of the oyster will change depending on what the spawning process is. I've already opened some, I'll show you in a minute, and some of these are actually gone quite milky, which is a part of the life cycle of the oyster, and it begins to happen at this time of the year. I quite like them when they're quite lean. So just looking at, let's just open them and have a look to see what they're like. As I said, these, you can get them year round because they're farmed. These are nurtured and farmed, but there's nothing in the shell in the summer. And if you're paying £1.20 odd each, up to £1.50, depending on the size, you open it up, there's nothing in there, you'd be wanting your money back. Whereas Lisa, these guys, which are anywhere, depending on where you get them from 50p up to 70p, you're always going to get something in there. So let me get one of my oysters out here. What I'm going to use, you've got two implements for my oysters here. Let me do a rock oyster first. I think I did this in one of our sessions before. I like to use a sharp tipped, doesn't hold that close, a sharp tipped oyster shucker, purely because I like to use the tip to delve into the heel. I like to go in at the heel of the oyster, and you want to push it in so it's rigid in there, and then relax, and then lever like so, and it'll just come loose. And then I'm running my knife across the top of the shell to release it, and then we can have a look. Now this doesn't have a huge amount of liquid in it. Some of them have. With an oyster, when you've opened it, if it's got a lot of liquid, you want to drip away, or allow just the first half teaspoon to drip away. Excuse me. And then what will happen is it'll continue producing a bit more moisture. In fact, it's already started doing that. I'm so sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. 2 seconds, sorry.
All right, we're not going to ask you a question right now then.
But you know how to serve these. Typically, you release them from the bottom shell and flip them over, because with anything like, best side of pan frying is usually the first side. The best side of serving these is the side that is in contact with the shell.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, if you want to...
a lot of the time, CJ, restaurants will turn the oyster, or you just leave them just natural, and let the customer turn them.
Do them themselves, yeah.
Yeah, I quite like when they're unturned. I just think they just look picture perfect. You've got the nice juice. You can really taste where they're from. When they get turned and then the juice goes out the oyster, I think it's you lose something. You lose its natural beauty. Yeah.
Well, you see, look at these, are absolutely gorgeous. They're full of liquid. I am going to tip out the first bit because there's a tiny bit of shell in there. You always use one of these oyster knives for shucking the natives, but there is this thing, and I know I showed it to you earlier. It's actually created by Rossmore, who are the people that actually produce these native oysters. These are from Loch Ryan, so they're just going to be the last batch. I don't know if I'll have many more, because they're coming to. We've got 2 or 3 weeks into May, and then you won't get them again until September. They use the Rossmore, which to open up. It's like a paper clip. When you're a paper. You know what I mean? What do I mean? A paper. I'm getting old, Roy. But so what you do is you go in at the end to break the shell. You know what I mean? A paper clip, not a paper clip, but a.
Thanks, Eddie. A hole punch.
A hole punch. Thank you. So you go around the edge, because it's very brittle on the edge. And then all you need to do is so somebody has not got very good control or haven't got the energy in their wrists, you go around clipping the edge and then run the knife up the middle of the oyster just to open it. And the only thing with this is you then have to be very careful to make sure you removed all the shards. So take off the top one.
Medieval toenail clipper. Or...
It does, doesn't it? But it's
horrendous.
It does look chipped. But as you know, they can sometimes be quite tricky to get into. Yeah, so this...
I quite like going in from the side, say like on a native oyster, it's quite
yeah.
Just because you know they're forgiving, the shell's not too much, and then when you go up and along, it's just so clean.
There you are. Actually, do you know? I would say that's exactly what I've just done with that one. This is so full in the shell; it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went in there. I generally tend to teach on the hinge, but you can do 10-2 or 10 past the hinge if you like, and then you end up with looks like a chewed oyster with your shell chewed off like that.
Yeah, well, Marion Armitage agrees as well. She goes, that tool looks terrible. So I agree with you, Marion. She thought that tool looked terrible.
It's a bit grim, but if you've got somebody that hasn't got much power, I have a 91-year-old grandfather who loves oysters, and there's no way he'd be able to manage that anymore.
Yeah.
So you know you got to use your energy.
Would the hole punch work?
If it's wide enough, I suspect it might do. Right, I've got my, just the other thing I wanted to do here is, you can see what happens with the Pacific or the rock oyster. It's gone quite creamy. And in fact, if I'm dripping out some of the juice from there, it's quite a creamy texture. I'm not that fond of them when we get to this stage of the year. In a couple of months' time, they'll fill out again. But these particular ones from Kate Roth, I've really enjoyed. I was sent some as a sample recently. And for those, what I would do, I've got my little oyster tray here, which I then pop under the grill. You would never, ever, it would be terrible, it's like blasphemy to cook a native oyster, but the rock oysters at this time of the year or any time of the year, you know, the North American Indians would have put them into the embers of a fire to get them to open. And for my native, I'd eat that. That one for £1.20 is not very big in the shell. But this one here looks beautiful. So I'm sorry I haven't got them to taste today. So you can grill these guys. The only thing that I would very often serve with the natives is either squeeze of lemon or a tiny, tiny splash of shallot vinegar. But squeeze of lemon to me works very well. And I don't know what you do in the restaurant.
Yeah, we're the same as you. If we're lucky enough to get the natives in, then obviously just natural. Just a little bit of the house wash dressing, which is normally like shallot vinegar or, you know, just lemon or just natural. And it depends on the oyster, CJ, and at what time. If they're nice and firm and they're good for grilling, then yeah, we do that. We do tempura, and we do a breaded oyster with oyster mayonnaise. You know, like we do go to town when we do our oysters. But you know, the exciting thing is that although that there's so many cultivated oysters available, they taste so different on where they come from and also texture. So, you know, I wouldn't just discount, you know, the cultivated oyster, you know, because they have such a good purpose. And
oh no, absolutely. Well, the natives, you know, we ended up in the end of the 19th century because they were so cheap. People were going to help themselves on the oyster beds. And back in the 1880s, the oyster beds were bought out, certainly around the Essex coastline, because people were helping themselves and they were ending up taking out oysters that were too small. And the government introduced the rock oysters into the UK in the 1930s because our native oyster, which was such a staple and so cheap at one point, was seeing a real decline. So it was a government initiative to bring these in. And of course, you know, I've been down to, I don't think it's there anymore, but there's an oyster hatchery down in Whitstable, which looks like an old science, you know, it's like it's also the scientific hatching of these. But if you take an oyster that's been hatched out in Whitstable and then send it to the south coast, to Loch Fyne, to Carlingford Bay over in Ireland, down to Poole, where you get a lot of them, Colchester, Malden, West Mersey, all of these places, and you do a tasting platter on one of these trays, because they're all living on different nutrients in the water. Some have more nutrients, which gives them a slightly shorter shell. Some have less nutrients, so the shell tends to grow, and you end up with such complex flavors. And when you ask people what they think about oysters, they go, oh, a bit briny, but actually you might get metallic flavors. You get briny at the beginning, the middle, and the end. You might get flavors of nuts, things like cashew nuts. You get through things like samphire and lettuce and cucumber. And then you very often get that sort of slightly damp sort of mushroom aroma and taste. And that's one of the beauty of trying these. And that's one of the things I love. But at certain times of the year, I would do a Rockefeller with some of those. So anyway, your particular favorite, do you have you got anything you particularly enjoy?
Carlingford, I have to say.
They're good, aren't they?
Yeah.
I'm allowed to say that though.
I know you're not allowed to say that, but I'm going to say it anyway. So
well, try the Cape Wrath ones. And I know that there's a lot going into Loch Fyne, and I think Loch Fyne have oysters that come from other areas, and they go through that depuration process. I went to see the depuration of these yesterday, and they put them into tanks. So they came from Loch Ryan. They're going into the market. They have these great big tanks, which have got changes of water running through them with an ultraviolet light, which gives a chance to kill off the bacteria. The water they come from is tested regularly to make sure there's no viruses in there. And then they kill off the bacteria. Down at Rossmore, they depurate them for 48 hours. The minimum they should do is 42, but they're like 48 hours. And the temperature's got to be right. You know, it's got to be, not if it's too cold, they don't depurate so well, they're not producing, you know, they tend to go a bit sluggish. I think it was between 10 and 18 degrees. I learned loads yesterday. It was very exciting to actually go and see it all happening. So, you know, you end up with a product on the table that's very diverse. So
lots of comments, CJ. Jamie Mack said he had his first native oyster working at the Stranraer Oyster Festival. He really enjoyed it. Grant Reiki, I grilled some Cumbria oysters directly on the coals with Errington cheese, Bonington Lynn, breadcrumbs and hot sauce, and was so tasty. However, I left them still attached, and one like actually popped and fired up out of the shell. Would you normally free them from grilling? I would say definitely. What would you do, CJ?
Yeah, I would free them. Yeah. What cheese did you use? What cheese was used?
He was using Bonington Lynn.
Oh, okay. That might end. I'm just thinking. I've got
the Errington family. Yeah, I've got that one.
Okay. Any more?
Yes. Grant also says, post-COVID, should we be more open to using larger grade oysters that have been grown over the lockdown as a cooking ingredient in pies and such? Do you know, Grant, that's a good question. I wonder how many oversized oysters there is, because through lockdown, we've been doing it at home. And I know a lot of people have been doing it at home, and I've seen a lot of oysters on at home menus. So I'm not too sure how many large oysters are around, but yeah.
You get these great big Royale things, and what they're very popular in the Chinese market. And what they do is they take them out of shell, drain off the liquid, and then slice them very, very finely.
A question slightly, oh gosh, where's it gone? I need to find it now. It's disappeared off my screen. Oh, there was a question. There was, yes. What do you both think about the barriers to getting more local seasonal seafood on restaurant menus? Is it a lack of supply or being difficult to source, lack of knowledge of what to do with it, price or species not being popular with consumers, or a combination of all above?
Well, I think a lot of it is to get the right suppliers, actually. And, you know, it's challenging, you know, your supplier, where they're getting the product from, because there are plenty of people out there. And certainly all of those fishermen are going to need as much support as they can over the next few months. Brexit's been horrendous with all the paperwork, but, you know, and then lack of purchasing. Although these guys with the guys that I got the oysters from yesterday said, like I've been watching, is that so the independent fishmongers. But I think challenging the supplier and also being up to date. You know, if you're looking at what Seafood Scotland are promoting, but also being up to date with you know, with local fish and who's landing what. I think you know, the more local it can be, the better it's going to be for everybody. I think it's got less carbon footprint.
Yeah, and it's good to, it's always
Okay,
good.
any more questions?
I was just going to say, it's always good to look at the Marine Conservation Society and what they're doing, because they always seem to be quite on the money in terms of what's good, what's right to eat at what time. I think they're always a good guide.
Absolutely. Now, they've got the Little Good Fish Guide, but their website's brilliant, and I often refer to it. And the reason I'm in the industry, I'm watching it all the time, but they update it all year. Every year it gets updated, being updated all the time, and things change, which is a great thing, because you're told not to eat something, we stop eating it, and you know, people then take it off the menu for a bit. It gives it a chance to recover. So Marine Conservation Society is a good one to go for, particularly with seasonality. Okay.
Right, so I'm just looking here.
Oh, and then very kind, here's a link to the Seafood Scotland's seasonality guide. So we've still got a few moments. I've rattled through that. I didn't think I've done all these different fish. So we talked about plaice and flatfish. We talked about our gurnard. We looked at the mackerel. I did have a little bit of herring, which I got. The herring for me last week came into the market. It was about £3 a kilo. It was blue. It was beautiful colour, but it had no roe in it, and they were catching it in the Thames estuary, and that's just great, just with oatmeal, just grilled. The mackerel, I would just grill that. So, any other questions coming? Not
yet. There's one already just been answered. It was from Alice. It was a culinary student. Because of COVID, our practical classes is restricted to the max. Plus, I can't get the plaice fish to practice because of the season. The fish is actually on the skills test. As soon as the Easter holidays is over, there is a chance I can ask for a recording of the copies on the webinars. Yes, you can. That's all good.
Okay. Well, they're coming back into season. You know, they're beginning to fill out again. And if you go to a fishmonger, we talk about its place being a bit skinny. It's definitely a little bit thin here, but I still think they're improving. So you should be able to get them soon. And the reason a fishmonger's not selling them is because he doesn't think the quality will be right, but they're still around and about. So if you order one, you might find someone will get one for you. Okay, Roy, I've so enjoyed doing these again. I'm sad this is our last one.
Yeah, I know.
It's fantastic. Seafood Scotland have taken the initiative to crack on with this. And the team who've been managing the event have been fantastic.
Well, I think, you know, it's a big hats up to Claire Dean from Seafood in Scotland, because she's been the most amazing person to work with over the last, 10 years. And a big supporter of local restaurants, and been a great supporter of our restaurant. And I'm very grateful for everything that she's done for us. And I'm sure you would echo that. Absolutely. Well, I've only known her for the last year or so, but I've been really delighted to have been involved in this, and it's been good to get to know you, and I can't wait to be allowed to head north and come up and sit in your restaurant and enjoy a meal. Well, listen, you've got to come up. I mean, I think we'll be like everybody else who's on this, who's working in hospitality. You just can't wait for these doors to open, and I think it's going to be really exciting, because we've all had a lot of time to think about what we're going to do, how we're going to approach it, you know, what we're going to serve. So yeah, I'm really hopeful for us all that it's going to be a good times ahead. Fantastic. Well, I look forward to seeing you soon, and I really appreciate, if anybody needs any more questions asked or want to ask anything, you can always get me at cjetsseafoodtraining.org, if I'm allowed to say that, if you've got anything about fishmongering or you want any more information. I'm very proud to be promoting Scottish product, because we deal with a lot of that in the market. So, well, you're half Scottish. Quarter. No, I might be half, actually. Yes, my mum was McIntyre is my family name, but I'm not a McIntyre. Well, that's 3/4 then if you're a McIntyre. Okay, right. I look forward to seeing you very soon, and thank you very much for everybody joining us. I've really enjoyed doing these, and please keep in touch. If you want to know any more, I'd be really keen to continue working with Scottish product. CJ, thanks so much, and thanks for everybody who's came in and... You calm me down, you help me to sleep. Oh, this love is big.